So, good morning, evening, or afternoon, and welcome to this webinar on risk and compliance, making risk and compliance screening part of your workflow. Um, my name is Bart-Jan Haasbeek. I am based in Amsterdam, and I am the head of corporate marketing, PR, and events. Compliance screening checks your business partners against relevant global sanctions. Nobody can afford not to be compliant. During this webinar, we will learn how to make risk and compliance screening part of your workflow. I must admit, I thought this would be a small webinar with just a few dozen of attendees, but it is extremely popular. We have many airlines, over 50 individual airlines, so it's quite big, and that shows how important compliance is in this day and age. There's a lot going on internationally. Rules are changing. It's important to be compliant. So before we listen to our panelists and our specialists, let me set some ground rules, explain the format of the webinar. 45 minutes, all data is fictitious, and the webinar has been organized for everybody in the supply chain. You will all receive a recording of the webinar and the handout of the slides. And if you have any questions, please use the tool and we will get back to you during the webinar. And if not, if we're out of time, we will get back to you via email on your question. And after the webinar, if you are interested to learn more, please reach out to us and we will get in contact with you. Before I introduce the panelists, a quick introduction of the agenda. I will do an introduction of the panelists in a minute. High-level overview of what is compliance about, and some tangible examples from our third-party speakers, our partners. How does it work behind the scenes? Cargospot integration. This is about Cargospot and how compliance becomes part of your workflow from Cargospot. We will show you how that works and explain how you can access this as well. And then the key takeaways, and we close the webinar. So please allow me to introduce our panelists for today. From CHAMP, we have Christopher Jordan, Head of Business Development, Beatrix Cheng, Lead Product Analyst, Cargospot Airline Management, Gatan van Diemen, Vice President of Product from Pandora Intelligence, and Stephen Holmes, Sales Director EMEA from E2Open. They will tell us more about risk and compliance screening. So welcome, panelists. Before we go to the first speaker, let me ask you a question. So Stephen, to kick off with you, what is an example of risk compliance?
Good morning, Mark, and thanks very much indeed for allowing us to join today. So today we'll be probably talking about four major components of international trade compliance risk, but the example of one which we're probably familiar with is commodity controls. And so these are often goods that could be a dual use. So for example, a potential military use that they could be put to. And of course, there have been some very high profile and well documented examples of firms falling foul of exporting to particular regions, these types of dual use goods that we should be aware of.
Okay, thank you. Nice and short indeed. So also got on in one sentence, how to avoid compliance risk.
Yeah, I'll keep it in one sentence, but there's a few aspects. The first one, which is I think the most important one, is stay informed, be informed about rules and regulations. Then implement the risk assessments for you to actually use those rules and regulations. And last but not least, make sure that for those two aspects you automate processes. I will keep it short to that. I would always say train the employees, but I'll keep it to this for now.
Okay, thank you, Gatan. We will hear from you later on. And Beatrix, will Cargospot help to reduce risk?
Well, Cargospot can help to mitigate the risk by having the capability to interface with the different screening providers to perform sanction screening, and will then display the results in Cargospot for users to review.
Okay, thank you. So, Christopher, I don't have a question for you. We now go to you as the first panelist for today. Could you give us an introduction of risk and compliance screening, please? You're on mute, Christopher.
Thank you, Bart-Jan. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you. And yes, as Bart-Jan said, there is a huge topic interest in risk and compliance screening. And one of the reasons is we all have to comply because there are some significant penalties and there's the risk of all sorts of sanctions against organizations that don't comply. But compliance with sanctions is hard. And what we're going to show you today is that we've built an integrated solution that actually makes it relatively simple. But the starting point is there's a constantly changing list of sanctioned products, goods, regions, and keeping compliant with that is hard work. Increasingly, as was mentioned earlier on by Stephen, lists are open to interpretation. So it's not just sanctions compliance, it's risk compliance. If it goes close to, if it might be passed to, if it could be used for. Um, Sanctions aren't limited to organizations either. You have to know the ultimate business owner. You have to know who they have relationships with. And organizations creating sanctions lists are growing from governments, states, to unions and international organizations such as the UN. So keeping track of all of that is a hard piece of work. One of the things that IATA said when we started looking at this area was they said the right place to start with compliance screening from a cargo capacity is at the point of capturing an airway bill. And this is where Cargospot really comes into its own because Cargospot is used to capture or receive the electronic airway bill. And what we're going to show you today is just at that point, we can instigate the sanction screening process. What we've done is we've said we don't know about sanction screening within CHAMP, but we pass on to experts. So what we will do is we will invoke experts, and we have two partners with us today that we've been working with for a few months, and indeed have gone live with for one client. And we pass to them the details of the airway bill. They return a risk assessment, which we then look at within Cargospot and use that to make informed decisions. And the key point, I would say in summary maybe of everything we've been doing, we are making compliance screening part of the workflow, not something that individuals have to do. Let me show this just in my final slide of this part. Essentially, as I said, when a master airway bill or house airway bill is created or received by Cargospot, there's a set of rules which evaluate what to do with it. You can configure, as a Cargospot user, whether to pass all or only international shipments. You could say, I want to pass only selected airway bill prefixes. So you might say, I don't want to pass my interline shipments. I only want to pass my own shipments for screening, or both. I want to exclude certain destination airports or countries. And I might want to look at manual and or electronic airway bills. And maybe I want to notify the senders of electronic airway bills. But then comes the interesting point is, based on the feedback we get from the screening provider, which could be categorized as high, medium, or intermediate, what do we do with it? Because the screening provider will do the check and return that assessment together with further details. And based on that assessment, what Cargospot does is it displays the screening flag and link in Cargospot screens and then amends the workflow. So if something's green, everything can go on as normal. But as Beatrix will show you, if something's not green, it might pass to a different level for review before it can even be loaded on a flight. So we said we're making compliance part of your workflow. That is the overall design of what we're going to talk about in more detail. So Bart-Jan, that's the overview from me.
Thank you. Thank you. So, yes, so if you have any questions for Christopher, please use the tool. I know I have a few already, but let's first ask the audience some questions. So I would like to raise a poll now. And the first question to you, to the audience, if you would be so kind to answer this question, do you know what a risk and compliance partner does? So, do you know what a risk and compliance partner does? And of course, you will learn today, but maybe you already know, so then you'll say yes, or if you don't know, it's no. So we're curious. We now see the first votes getting in. And it's going pretty quick. We are now at 40% of the audience that voted. So let's wait a little longer that we get around the 60 mark, which we have now, but it's still rising. So let's wait a little longer. Yeah, it's 1 minute now. So that must be sufficient for you, and share the results. And Christopher, maybe back to you. This is a surprise. It's a bit 50-50.
Bart-Jan, I think it is not a surprise because several airlines and indeed handlers are on this call will be using sanctions providers today. This isn't a new thing. There are others for whom they are not using a sanctions provider, so they're not necessarily familiar, and some will have a view. So that broad range reflects our view. It is an important topic, but not necessarily everybody is using sanctions providers today.
Yeah. So to get to that point, are you currently using a risk and compliance partner? So just now it was about 50-50. So now I'm curious. We are curious. Are you currently using a risk and compliance partner? Yes, no, or maybe you have no idea. And 20% have voted. So let's wait a little longer. 30 seconds have gone. You know now how to do this. So this must be a bit quicker. 50 seconds and we get to 50%. And this result is pretty decisive, almost 1 minute, and we have 60%. So let's share the results. Yeah, let's go back to you, Christopher, again. So here it's a no.
It's a yes and a no, actually, because for the yes, we have a new way of integrating screening providers into Cargospot. For the no's, we have an easy entry for you to start using a screening provider.
Yes, indeed. Let's learn more about that. Let's hear from the screening providers, and let's go to our first third-party panelist, our partner. I would like to welcome Steven Gatan van Diemen at Pandora Intelligence. So, Gatan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bart-Jan. Pandora Intelligence, we're a Dutch company. We're based in Utrecht, for those who are familiar with Dutch cities. We're delivering solutions worldwide, and very often we do that with partners. And Jamp is, and that's why we're in this call here today, one of those important partners. What we're doing is providing decision-making software. That doesn't mean that we offer you software that makes decisions for you. That means that we offer software that helps you bring the information together to substantiate your decisions. And if you look at our DNA, it really has its roots in risk, safety, and compliance. You can see that in our people, but you can also see that in the solutions we deliver to the market. We have 4 of them currently on the screen. All of them have in some way a relation to risk, safety, or compliance, or sometimes all three of them, like it's the case in, for example, cargo intelligence, which we're going to talk about now. So why do we actually want to help you with compliance and safety? Well, there's many reasons, but if we pick the most important aspects or the most important challenges that we have noticed the players of this industry are facing, I would summarize it to the following four. The first one is competition. It's quite a fierce competition in the air cargo market, and that drives the need for operational excellence. And unfortunately, that is quite incompatible, or that is quite a struggle when we come to the second point, because when we talk about regulations or rules and regulations, what we notice is they are quite a hassle to implement, or at least they do represent some challenges when it comes to standardization and automation. So on one hand, you want to be operational, have very, very excellent operations. You want to be efficient. On the other hand, you have constantly changing regulations, which are really a challenge. The issue you have when being non-compliant or not being able to be compliant with those regulations or rules is actually the third point, which is unfortunately something we notice still happening too often. The financial impact of fines. We put here in this slide some of the examples which we've seen in the news, whether it's recent or a bit older, but even worse, the reputational risks. So it's nobody wants to have their name in a news article mentioning or being adverse media. So that's a very, very important aspect for us to make sure we help you being compliant and safe to avoid ending up in those news. And last but not least, this is a very interesting trend we've noticed in the last few years. It's mostly due to the large volumes of e-commerce we see transiting across the globe. The increase in, unfortunately very often hidden, dangerous goods. And what I mean by that is very often we see a lot of cheap or low quality goods transiting through air cargo, which contain, and specifically here when we talk about dangerous goods, lithium batteries, which is quite a safety concern. Now, how we actually help with those topics. We built a solution called Cargo Intelligence, and we decided to split it in three components. There's a few additional components in the make at the moment, but those were the three really core and key components that we noticed our customers and prospects needed. The first one is the detection of sanctioned and restricted entities. It's really looking at sanctions, embargoes, so individuals, organizations, countries, etc., which have in some way been flagged by some authorities and which you should not be doing business with. That is a very, very important one. It's one that exists for a long time, for example, the financial industry, but cargo has been facing those challenges, or the air cargo industry has been facing those challenges too for several years already. The second one is the detection of dangerous goods. And as I mentioned, one, I think, of our very important USP is the ability to detect hidden dangerous goods, so undeclared dangerous goods. We'll do that by looking at the context behind the shipment. So who is the shipper, who is the consignee, what's their business, what are they doing, where they're located, etc. And with that context, we can tell you the likelihood of having dangerous goods in the cargo. And last but not least, the detection of strategic goods, so military and dual-use goods, where we can not only detect them in a shipment, but also match them with specific regulations. So we can tell you, oh, this specific good, this specific shipment falls under the EAR or the ITAR, respectively, for dual-use and military goods. But we can also point you to the exact sections in those regulations which you have to be compliant with. So again, the whole idea of what we're doing is to not only make it simpler to make your decisions, but also point you to the right direction. And what comes out of it, and I'll let Beatrix tell you a bit more about what it looks like in Cargospot, but is a risk level, so a traffic light, red, orange, or green, a summary of the risk assessment, so a little narrative which explains what you're looking at, and last but not least, a link that points back to our platform where you can find all the underlying information. Now, why AI, and I really wanted to finish with this, will and can make a difference is people that have ill intentions or organizations with ill intentions will do everything to remain under the radar. And I'll not explain all the examples here. The ones on the right, I think very interesting. We have here two goods description. The first one, Sunpado 120C soft pack XT6 plug. For a random person like me, I have no idea what it is. That's literally what it says is in the package. Well, what you see here is our AI model, and that's why we highlighted it in red, is actually explaining with a little story what I read here makes me think that there's lithium batteries in the package, simply because the XT60 plug is actually a plug which is commonly used for lithium batteries. Well, that points you into the right direction. And the second one, which I think is more of a thing for us in the Netherlands, there's a football club called Ajax. Here we see in this goods description Nike Ajax or MIM Nike Ajax. As an analyst responsible for clearing risks in cargo, you might think, oh, Nike Ajax, those are probably sportswear related to this football club. Well, actually, I have bad news. This is literally a missile. And that's literally exactly why we make use of AI to actually help you making your decisions faster in a consistent way and less prone to human errors. And with this being said, I'll hand over to Stephen or to Bartjan.
Thank you, Gatan. Thank you. I like the Ajax example. Behind me, you see a statue over my shoulder, which is actually the Ajax bust. It's there always. I didn't put it there now for this webinar. It's always there. So I have something with Ajax. So but a quick question to you. You showed a few examples. Fortunately, you blurred them. Were your examples preventable?
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we now have the technology to detect those risks based solely on the data which is to be found in airway bills, so master and houseway bills. And actually, if you use the technology as early as possible in the shipments, and we usually recommend do it at origin, do it at the moment the airway bill has been established, you can ensure that pre-acceptance and hopefully at all departure of the goods in a truck from the freight forwarder. So at least pre-acceptance, you are aware of the risks and make sure that those dangerous goods or this illegal shipment is not stuck in your warehouse or unfortunately loaded into a plane, which you'll then have to unload. So it is preventable.
Okay, thank you, Gatan. We will get back to you. But first, let's go to Stephen. Stephen, we're curious to learn about you, from you. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. It's actually sunny in the UK today, which is rather distracting. I can't believe that's happened. Just a one-off, I think, probably. Yes, but thank you very much indeed for the introduction. It's very good to be here. So E2Open, first of all, no reason why you should have heard of us, but E2Open, we are a pure software supply chain provider. So although we're interested in things like CRM and ERP solutions, we are purely involved in the supply chain and software market. And our real interest is all around digitalizing supply chains. So removing manual intervention, removing data silos, and allowing organizations to provide efficient end-to-end solutions. And that's all about providing visibility, being able to see what's happening in real time, and therefore proactively control what's in your supply chain. And that's very evident of what we're discussing today. We work with some of the world's largest organizations, specifically in the airline compliance arena. We work with the likes of Cathay, Air France, and Etihad. And hopefully, I know one or two people who voted yes to utilizing a compliance solution in that previous poll. I think that might be the case. So end-to-end orchestration, as I say, is key and fundamental to us. We operate a complete end-to-end environment, which starts, as any good supply chain does, with the customer, with the point of delivery, and goes back through the various processes that are involved in demand planning, supply planning, right way through into potential areas of subcontract and purchase order maintenance. But what we're interested in today is, of course, right at the center of this end-to-end environment, which is global trade. And that's where we're focusing on. If we scratch the surface of global trade, what underpins that for us as an organization is what we describe as global knowledge. Now, global knowledge is essential because what it allows us to do is to take all text and textual syntax, or the legal information which is distributed by 200 plus countries around the world, and convert that into a digital syntax that can be consumed by an automated process. This is part of the complexity that Christopher Adam's already referred to. This is a hugely complex environment for an individual organization to operate with. And I know that organizations can operate manually, but the world that Google is only limited to a certain amount of capability in this respect. So we utilize our capabilities to provide 18 million updates per annum around all the areas of free trade, import, export, embargoes, etc. And part of what underpins that is our ISO process. So when you engage with us, what we have is a substantiated process for updating the knowledge and the information in the ISO environment, and therefore have a source of information that you can refer back to in order to ratify the solutions that have been produced by a search. You might also notice on the certification here that there's a quite a familiar name to quite a lot of people, I would imagine, in the carrier world, which is Amber Road, which is essentially the software that our solutions grew out of in the last few years. So the updated process actually guarantees that any new legislation that is released to the market will be updated within 48 hours of that release, so ensuring that you're always compliant. So we mentioned about the 4 major areas of compliance that we would focus on. So for us, these are the commodity and trade compliance that we've already mentioned, the potential for dual use and military use in an environment. We have partner compliance, so those organizations to ensure they're not operating on a nefarious level in some way, shape or form. Proximity and locations compliance, so is there potential for an export and import to be re-exported or imported to an embargoed country or partner from a solution? And finally, the export import embargo compliance themselves, which is destination and transit locations, etc. So these are the areas that we would screen against, and of course this is connected to AI to ensure that the information is interrogated and any potential matches are ascertained, and then process results back through the UI, which we'll see. So easy integration and blended. So this is what we would transmit back to our partners, and this is where Beatrice will pick up from, but essentially we'll analyze all 4 areas for potential risk, blend the overall scores, present this back as an easy to follow ragged solution. And then each operator then has the ability to drill down into that information to ascertain exactly where that risk has come from and what the potential ramifications could be, so that you're making the right decisions with all the information, and of course that visibility of the process itself in order to ensure that you are compliant. And if there are questions asked, you have the data to fall back to.
Thank you, Stephen. So that was clear. So yes, indeed. Let's now go to Beatrix and learn how this works in Cargospot and how visible that is. And Stephen, we will get back to you with a few questions after this. So Beatrix, please, over to you.
Okay, sure. Okay. In the nutshell, what Cargospot does is it sends the necessary information for screening to the service provider, who will perform the screening and return the results, which is then displayed in Cargospot. So depending on the requirements, Cargospot provides the flexibility to set up what types of shipments should be screened. And this is a one-time setup done by user with the necessary rights. For example, as Christopher has pointed out, we can indicate the type of shipments, whether domestic, international, and in addition, what type of shipments could be exempted from the section screening by the airway bill prefix and destination. So the trigger points for the screening is also configurable. Trigger point means when the request is being sent to the service provider for screening. For example, we can indicate it as when the full data capture is done, or when the FWB, FHL messages are received and processed. And also we can indicate when cargo acceptance is performed and acceptance record is created. In addition, Cargospot users and forwarders can be set up to receive notifications of the screening results. The users of Cargospot will also be able to view the results accordingly from the various screens and take appropriate actions accordingly. So in this example here, we have a full waybill screen where you can see the screening results displayed at the top of the screen in that color-coded box over there. And in the next example of a booking screen, we can see the sanctions results placed in a similar position for the ease of view. In the last slide, the example of export acceptance, this shows the screening results displayed in a similar fashion. As you notice, the different results are in different colors to help the users identify the outcome of the screening easily. So what are the possible outcomes and colors that we can have? We can have red, which means high risk, yellow, medium risk, green, which means everything is fine, and you have gray, which is we are unable to determine the risk. So users can then configure in Cargospot whether to block shipments with risk such as medium or high risk. This means that these shipments cannot be confirmed in Cargospot, and only users with the necessary overrides are able to force confirm the bookings. So more details of the screening results can be accessed from the booking or the full waybill screen. So each screening result done will have a unique ID to identify the screening request. The risk summary report field will provide more details on the screening outcome and whether screening has been completed. The URL will provide users the necessary details of the screening done by the screening service provider directly. And if required, users can then enter the internal remarks under user remarks field for their own reference. Lastly, Cargospot also provides a function to generate reports on the sanction screening done for a specific period and specific stations. This report can be generated for the last 6 months data, and each report run is limited to only 1 month of data. The report will consist of 2 parts: summary showing the number of airway bills and master airway bills and house airway bills for each airway bill origin. And at the bottom, there'll be a detailed breakdown of the master airway bill and house airway bill level information. This report can also be scheduled to run on a regular basis, and the generated report can be sent to a specific list of recipients.
Thank you, Beatrix. So the first questions are getting in. So let me raise a question before we go to the poll and ask the audience a question. The question is, are the results from screening tool fully integrated in Cargospot?
Yes, it's fully integrated. We will display the results based on whatever the service providers provide. And if they require more details, they can go to the service providers page, the web page, and look at it directly from there.
Okay. Let's go back to the questions in a minute. There are more questions, but let's ask the audience a few questions first again. The third poll question: would it be beneficial to have this capability in Cargospot? So what Beatrix just explained and showcased, or for that matter, in another system if you do not use Cargospot, cargo management system. Would it be beneficial to have this capability in Cargospot or your cargo management system? So half a minute gone, 30% have voted. Let's wait a minute. 10 more seconds. We will have around 60% again, so that is a good engagement for this question. And yeah, Christopher, I will ask you again to comment. yeah,
Okay. I think the audience have voted yes. It would be good to have this integrated,
yeah.
which is a
So this,
relief because Beatrix has built it.
yes,
That's yeah,
uh,
very good.
this is also pretty exciting for Stephen and Gatan, I'm sure.
Indeed,
So
indeed.
let's go back to the last question. Are you interested to learn more about this service? Yes, no, or maybe it's not applicable. So let's again wait a minute, literally, and then I will share the results. Um, I expect the result to be a little, the percentage should be a little lower here, although it's increasing rapidly. And I think that Gatan and Stephen are even more excited about this result. Yeah, again, 10 seconds to go, but we're already on 60%. Yeah, so to be, yeah, let's go back to again to you, Christopher. But yeah, it's obvious.
Yeah, we'll get back to you. Thank you for your interest. Yeah, but I've got a minute,
Okay.
a couple of summary points. But yeah,
Yes. So let's close the poll and then explain to the audience who just voted how this will work and what now will be done.
brilliant.
So
Thank you, Bart Jan, for that, and also for the poll results, which are very encouraging. How to contract? This is a collaborative service, which means an airline or handler can choose the service provider that suits their business best, and the airline handler would sign the provider's agreement. The airline also, or handler, would sign an AWR with CHAMP, which means that we invoke the service, we deliver the service, we support the service, and we get it working with the service provider and maintain that operation. And between CHAMP and the service provider, in full transparency, there is an API agreement which covers how we communicate and service levels and things like that. So from a contracting point of view, as an airline handler, you would sign two agreements, one with the chosen provider and one with CHAMP. And we, of course, can put you in touch with Gaitan or Stephen as appropriate. In terms of delivery, which is the final point, we have the service working today. And at the bottom, we have a partial service today. This is sending airway bills and house airway bills from CHAMP to one of our screening providers for a client that's using Cargospot today. The service that Beatrix is deploying and has built and is deploying in Cargospot 24.3 from the start of October, that will actually operate the bidirectional service. So we will send house and master airwables based on service rules, and we will receive back the airway risk level and core service sanctions details and include those in Cargospot. We also can make the service available to Traxon clients, though of course that's more a one-way screening service because from Traxon we also see airway bills. So I think the summary is we started by saying we want to make cargo screening part of the workflow. I hope we've explained how we do it. And the key point about this is it can meet what IATA says is a key aspect of sanction screening, which is to screen early. And as Beatrix said, we can screen if the information's there from the booking stage or from the cargo acceptance whenever we get the airway information. It's easy to start. But Jan, I don't think I have much more to say.
okay, thank you, thank you. It's easy to start, so that's reassuring. So we have many questions and 5 minutes left. So we will get back to the audience with the individual questions. One pressing question I see from the audience, from a ground handler, if this will be available or is available in Cargospot handling. Christopher or
Christopher?
Beatrix. No, Beatrix,
Beatrix.
go.
Yeah.
It's possible to do it from the handling because it is basically just sending the messages request and then getting back with the answer, because we actually have it built for the export acceptance.
Okay. So can a Cargospot user change or override the risk assessment manually?
No, you can't.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
But
so
Jan, if I may add, a Cargospot user can add comments, as Beatrix showed. So they can say, we've looked at this and we've made our own assumptions, and for this reason, we are allowing it to be loaded. But they
yeah.
can't change the screening result.
Okay. Thank you. So um, yeah, there's too much. Okay, Gaton, to you. This is one. Does compliance check potentially reduce crime?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I have a bit of a different background. I come from threat intelligence. And what we notice, and we notice it here too, is the more you make it complicated for criminals to operate, the least they will actually use your services to, or undermine your services to perform or to operate their, or use you for their criminal operations. So indeed, and that's what I said a bit earlier, as early as possible, you detect risks and manage those risks properly, the less towards the future you will have problems with criminal behavior. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Stephen, this is a whole story. It's hard to read everything, but this person asks about the supply chain. It starts with the shipper, and then when it arrives at an airline, there are so many partners already who have touched the goods.
They
So
do indeed.
the,
Yes.
yeah, the first question this person asks is, how can an airline then be accountable if there's already so many checks in between? And if there's a check earlier in the pipeline, if it then stays with the shipment, that the others know this is compliant.
Mm. The crucial element here is the duty of care, isn't it? And it doesn't matter how many hands this passes through, there is a responsibility on the carrier for safety and security declarations. It's part of the business flows that we're operating with. So you can't say that just because somebody else shipped it, it makes it okay that you're handling it. The authorities, when they're looking at potential breaches of risk compliance, can look at any party, the shipper, the handler, the carrier involved. What you have to be able to do within your own environment is demonstrate good process and due diligence, i.e. have you made every effort to ensure compliance with authorities and the capabilities. And so long as you are able to do that, then you stand on a sound legal footing to represent your case, whatever it might be. So that being able not just to provide a result, but show how that result was generated is absolutely crucial. And just to pick up on, the criminality aspect that Gordon was talking about, it's not necessarily then the fine, which is of primary importance. It's the loss of reputation in the marketplace. And I
Yeah,
think that's really where we should all be focusing on, is that good practice is good practice for everybody, and
yeah.
therefore extending this across the supply chain is imperative.
Yes, indeed. I'm a PR person, so yeah, the reputation it's quite important. We are out of time. I have one more question myself to you, Stephen, and that is, if you have proven, like you just mentioned, that you are trying to be compliant, but something slips through the net. Will the authorities take this into consideration, or what's the experience if you really try something but still?
Absolutely. I mean, it is absolutely, because remember what we're talking about is risk, isn't it? This isn't an absolute. That's bad. That's incorrect. That's wrong. What we're talking about is risk, and what you're establishing through a good process is your attention to detail to ensure that you are as compliant as you possibly can be under all of those circumstances that we see in the extension. There are millions and millions of areas of compliance, but good process and good practice with the right data, both input and the right data to analyze against, will give you the best possible outcome to ensure that you are compliant under those circumstances should you fall foul of some nefarious act or product or shipper.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, that brings us to the conclusion of this webinar. It's exactly 45 minutes, so I will do this quickly, the summary. So Christopher started with a high-level explanation. Then we went to our partners, Pandora and E2Open, who explained what is compliance and risk compliance and how does it work in the background, why is this important, how is it conducted, etc. Then Beatrix showed us how this works in Cargospot, and Christopher explained how you actually can start using it and what the next steps are. So creating an agreement with us and with the partner, and you're up and running. So the key takeaway today is that Cargospot can now send airway bills to screening providers based on rules, including destination and airway bill prefix, to ensure that the right shipments are always screened. So that concludes this webinar. I would like to thank our panelists today, Christopher, Stephen, Gatan, Beatrix. Many thanks for your knowledge and sharing the knowledge. And of course, the audience, many thanks for joining this webinar, and hopefully we will see you at the next webinar. Thank you very much, and until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.